Good afternoon. The next song the concert choir will sing is Turn My Heart, O God. And in your service folders in the middle, there's a page that has the refrain on it and also a response that you'll sing. We will introduce the refrain, then I'll turn to you and ask you to join us in singing that refrain, and then I'll help you through with the verse responses after that. Most congregations get it, I think it'll be just fine. Please join us now in singing Turn My Heart, O God.
Since she was the mother of 5 children, it was difficult for her family to understand God's chosen path for their lives. This hymn became a source of resolving testimony for the family as they sought to trust God's power in the midst of uncertainty. Julie lived her life with a focus on things above, and her family affirms, what God ordains is always good. This truth remains unshaken.
God ordains as always good. Good afternoon. I'm Pastor Joel Peterman. I'm the current president at Michigan Lutheran Seminary, and it's a pleasure for us to be with you today. He was a scientist. He was working in the Himalayas on a mountain not far from Mount Everest on a glacier. His companions had gone down to the base camp to get some more supplies while he stayed up and was doing some more experiments, and one day he decided to go out and get some more samples to do tests on. as he was walking, and then all of a sudden the ground underneath him gave way. He had fallen into a crevasse on a glacier. He fell 7 stories down. As he fell, he took his axe and put it into the side, trying to slow his fall, but it jerked his arm out of its socket, tearing his muscles and ligaments, rendering his arm useless. His face crashed against the side of the glacier, breaking bones and starting bleeding on his face. After falling 7 stories, he finally came to a stop rather suddenly on a piece of ice that had wedged itself in that glacier, breaking ribs and many of his vertebrae. It was in excruciating pain, but if it hadn't been for that piece of ice, he would have fallen to his death. He knew well from his experiences that people almost never get out of a fall down into a crevasse. As he looked up, all he could see was light, some 70 feet above him. How would you have felt if you were that man? The reality for us is that all of us are really in a spiritual crevasse. We are broken and bleeding because of our guilt and our sin. We have fallen far away from God. But even as we live our lives as Christians, we find ourselves having difficulty being God's children. The choir sang a song a few moments ago that's entitled, or it begins with the word, "In hopelessness and near despair." And having fallen into that spiritual crevasse, that's how we often feel in our lives. And even when we live our lives as Christians, we feel, like the choir member is saying, sometimes prodigal and sometimes Pharisee. As we struggle with what the Apostle Paul called sometimes wanting to do what God wants, but not able to do. And as we look at ourselves and our lives of attempts to try to do what God wants us to do and failing, it's very easy for us to get into hopelessness and near despair before God. But did you notice how that song changed its mood in the middle? We were facing death. We were facing God's wrath. But suddenly what we hear is forgiven. What we are is washed clean. What we are is forgiven and loved. Isn't that an outstanding song? And isn't it our song? Can't you put yourself in that song? Allow me to share with you some words from God in Hebrews chapter 12 that put us right in that song. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Our choir today sings songs like that because they represent a school that's all about that message. Michigan Lutheran Seminary is a ministerial education school. It's about ministry. And ministry is all about a message to take to the world, a message that we fix our eyes on Jesus, who gives us hope in our hopelessness and near despair. That message is one that we carry out because God has given that message to us. He wants us to take that message to the world. Do you realize how unique that message really is in our world today? So many in our world don't know about Jesus. They live in hopelessness and despair as they try to bring themselves out of that spiritual crevasse that they're trapped in their lives. That man that I mentioned to you, amazingly, was able to chimney himself out of that crevasse, and he was rescued. But in the spiritual crevasse, that's an impossibility. There is no rescue except from above. And that's why these young people are here today, to share that message and to be part of that future ministry. About 50% of these young people will become pastors and teachers, sharing that message and fixing people's eyes on Jesus. The other 50% will become faithful lay members of congregations like yours, where they will individually share that same message because they've learned to fix their eyes on Jesus. It's God's ministry, so it goes according to His plan. But ultimately, His plan is that there be those who share the message with others. I'd ask you today to support these young people in a couple of ways. Support them, first of all, with your encouragements today. As you have opportunity to talk with them a little bit later after the service, encourage them in their ministry. And encourage the young people that are here to consider going into the parish work of being a called pastor or teacher. Also, I ask you to pray for them. It's so important that we pray for these young people and for other young people to consider the public ministry of that gospel, to share that message of Jesus. And finally, I ask you to support them with your offerings. As you bring your offerings here, some of that helps to support Michigan Lutheran Seminary, or direct gifts to Michigan Lutheran Seminary also helps us to continue to train up a new generation of those who will fix people's eyes on Jesus. We are a Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran school. We prepare young people to go to Martin Luther College. But we also, of course, have a special place in the history of the Michigan Synod and the Michigan District of our wells. We've been doing that very thing for 108 years in Saginaw. May God bless us so that we always have pastors and teachers to continue to help us fix our eyes on Jesus, so that we never are lost in hopelessness and near despair. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of the words of our God.